I always believed that if you did the right thing, helped your family, stayed honest, they'd do right by you. I believed that until the day I got a text from my father disinviting me from the family reunion like I was some kind of troublemaker. No warning, no discussion. Just, you're no longer welcome. You've caused enough tension. And the worst part? The tension he was talking about was me quietly removing my name from a loan I never agreed to. What would you do if your entire family turned against you for simply protecting yourself? Stick with me, because what they didn't know was that their lies had a paper trail. And I wasn't about to go down for something I never signed up for. My name is Jessica Lowell. I'm 31, a public school teacher, and a single mom to the brightest little soul you've ever met, Avery, my 7-year-old. Our world is small but warm. I teach 3rd grade in a little New Hampshire town where people still wave when you pass by, and my daughter thinks pancakes are an appropriate dinner at least twice a week. I never imagined I'd be the black sheep of my own family, but that's what I became, without warning, on a Saturday morning that started just like any other. I was still in my robe, sitting on the edge of the bed, hair half damp from the shower, when my phone buzzed. It was from my father, Roger. He's a man of few words and even fewer explanations, and this text was no different. You're no longer welcome at the reunion. You've caused enough tension already. I blinked at it for a full 30 seconds, like maybe it would change if I stared hard enough. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was confusion. What tension? What had I done? Then it hit me. The only tense thing I'd done was call the bank 2 days ago and request to cancel my co-signature on a loan. Something I did quietly, with no announcement, no drama, just protecting my credit. I hadn't even told anyone. So how did they find out? That was the moment something shifted. Like the floor under my feet gave a subtle lurch, and I realized I'd been standing on borrowed trust this whole time. I scrolled up through my messages with him. No build-up, no discussion. Just that single sentence, cutting me out like a loose thread. The reunion was meant to be next weekend, hosted at my Uncle Warren's lake house, the same place we'd gathered every summer since I was a kid. It was supposed to be filled with bonfires, late-night card games, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. And now, apparently, I wasn't welcome. The coldness of it all clung to me. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. No warmth, no "we need to talk." Just a sentence, clean and final. I sat there, in silence, holding my phone like it had betrayed me. Avery peeked into the room, clutching her favorite blanket, her hair a tangled halo from sleep. "Mommy, are we still going to the lake?" And there it was, the question I didn't know how to answer. I smiled the way mothers do, when their hearts are breaking quietly. "Not this time, baby." Plans changed. She pouted, but didn't push. Just climbed into my lap and rested her head against my chest as if her little body could absorb the confusion I couldn't explain. That's when I made the first real decision. I didn't scream, I didn't call anyone. I just stood up, gently placed Avery down, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. I logged into the bank account, the one I'd set up years ago with just-in-case access for emergencies. The one my father had once praised me for being so responsible about. And I started pulling down names. Because if I was going to be cut out for doing the right thing, then I might as well do it thoroughly. There's something deeply sobering about realizing you've been trusted for the wrong reasons. Not for your judgment, not for your character, but because you were convenient. That morning, sitting in my quiet home while Avery colored dinosaurs on the living room rug, I began the quiet work of unbinding myself. I started with the emergency joint account. It was supposed to be for my mom, just in case, she'd said when my dad had his first scare with heart medication. I remember the day she asked. Her voice trembled just slightly. "Jessica, could we add your name to a separate account, just for emergencies? You know how hospitals can get?" Of course I'd said yes. What kind of daughter would say no? But now, staring at the transactions, the pattern was obvious. This wasn't emergency usage. It was groceries, gas station stops, hotel charges, restaurant bills, steadily siphoned without mention. I had never questioned it. That's on me. I printed the last 3 months of statements, highlighted the largest withdrawals, and noted the dates. Most of them corresponded with family get-togethers I hadn't been invited to. Then I called the bank. Yes, I'd like to close a joint account and remove my name, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. No, there's no dispute. I'm just done being part of it. It felt like unsubscribing from a life I no longer belonged to. Next, I turned to the credit alerts. Years ago, I'd agreed to be a backup signer on my Uncle Warren's real estate fund, only on paper, they'd said, just to help him qualify for a better rate. At the time, my credit was the only thing in the family that sparkled. I hadn't thought much of it since, until now. I called the credit agency, flagged my identity for watch, and asked for any associated inquiries in the last 6 months. What I saw made my stomach clench. There had been 3 recent requests for financing, all tethered, somehow, to my name, my social, my profile. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know my trust had been used like a crowbar. Quietly, repeatedly, I drafted a letter, revoking my consent for any further use of my signature, typed it with the kind of deliberate detachment teachers use when writing referrals for students they still like but can't excuse anymore. Then I emailed it to the family accountant. Subject line, please remove all financial authorizations. Effective immediately. No pleasantries. No soft landings. Just facts. By the time I shut my laptop, Avery had fallen asleep on the couch, a crayon still tucked between her fingers. I sat beside her and watched her chest rise and fall, her cheeks still flushed with the glow of childhood. She was my anchor now, my why. For a moment, I thought about calling my mom, asking gently how much they knew, but I stopped myself. I realized I didn't need confirmation. Their silence, their coordination, the text from my father, those were my answers. The final thing I did that day was pull out the box, the one every single mother has, full of things you don't want to think about, but might need someday. Insurance forms, school records, custody agreements, and tucked between them, my will. I opened it, made a small revision to remove any financial executor privileges from my family members, and listed Maya instead. My best friend since college, and the only one who had never asked me for more than I could give. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was recalibrated. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Avery had gone to bed, sipping chamomile tea and staring at my phone. The family group chat was quiet. No follow-ups, no "are you okay?" No birthday wishes for Avery, whose celebration had been the weekend before. Just silence. It was the kind that tells you everything you need to know. And yet, some naive part of me still hoped maybe, just maybe, this was a misunderstanding, a misfire, that someone would call and say, "Hey Jess, this is all just a mess, we'll fix it." But no one did. And when I lay down that night, alone in my bed, I didn't cry. I just whispered to the ceiling, if they think I'm the problem, let's see what happens when I disappear from their plans completely. Because I wasn't cutting ties out of anger. I was cutting them because I finally understood. They were never knots of love, just ropes of obligation, and I was done being tangled. The next morning began with the sharp trill of my phone vibrating against the hardwood floor. I'd left it there beside the bed, unwilling to keep it on the nightstand like usual. I didn't want it close. I didn't want them close. It was 6:42 a.m., 7 missed calls, all from Tyler. Tyler, my older brother by 4 years, the family's unofficial fixer, the one who could charm his way out of a tax audit or a speeding ticket. He was the golden boy, the one who always seemed just on the edge of something big. In his world, every problem had a solution, usually someone else's wallet. I didn't answer. I stared at the screen as it rang again, his contact photo flickering like a warning light. Then came the voicemail. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Jess, hey, listen, I need to talk to you. Like, now. It's important. Really important. You might have done something without realizing it, and it's bad timing. Just call me back, okay? Please. The word please was what tipped me off. Tyler didn't do desperate, not unless something was slipping. I got up, poured myself a coffee, and stared out the window at the rising sun, cold and cloudless. My pulse beat louder than the silence in the house. 2 minutes later, another call. Different number this time. Jessica Lowell? The voice said, brisk and tight. Yes, this is Mitchell Franz, your family's accountant. I need to speak with you about a few urgent discrepancies that arose this morning. I'm hoping this is just a clerical miscommunication. There it was. The scramble. I kept my tone neutral. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Franz. Well, he cleared his throat. We received notification late yesterday that you removed your name from the joint authorization related to, a bridge loan with Trenton Federal. That's complicated. I simply withdrew my financial involvement, I said calmly, since no one thought it important to inform me I was involved in the first place. There was a pause. Jessica, I believe we may have a serious issue. I need to verify some things with you, off the record, if you'd be willing. This loan, well, it's a substantial one. How substantial? I asked, though my voice came out quieter than I'd intended. $1, 7 million. The number struck me like a physical blow. I sat down, the coffee mug suddenly too heavy in my hand. Excuse me? I whispered. Your Uncle Warren's commercial property fund. You were listed as a secondary guarantor. I was under the impression you'd signed off on the liability during a family conference last summer. I never signed anything beyond a basic co-support form in 2021, I said, my voice now trembling with something deeper, something closer to betrayal. There was never any mention of a $1, 7 million loan, and I certainly never agreed to personally guarantee it. The line went quiet again, save for the rapid clicking of a keyboard. Well, this complicates things, he said, his voice now more strained than before. Did you know this, Mr. Franz? I asked. Did you know they were using my credit and name without full disclosure? I assumed you were aware, he said, but the guilt in his tone gave him away. It's very possible there were assumptions made. Poorly. I could almost see him loosening his tie, sweating through the linen of some crisp office shirt. Accountants aren't used to people pulling out of the game once the chessboard is set. I'm going to need copies of everything, I said. Every form that has my name. Every document attached to that loan. Today. Of course, he muttered. The moment I hung up, my phone lit up again. Tyler. This time, I picked up. Jess, listen. Before you freak out, I already spoke with Mitchell, I said, a long, shaky exhale on his end. Okay. So you know about the loan. Why is my name on a $1, 7 million real estate bridge? He was quiet for a beat too long. Because Warren said we needed a strong profile to secure it. And yours was the cleanest. You're dependable. Dependable. As if that justified anything. You let them put my name on a $1 million loan? I said, each word slicing with clarity now. Without even asking me? It wasn't supposed to be risky. It's just a bridge. Short term, high yield. Warren said we'd close the flip in 90 days. It's already gone longer, but it's temporary. Tyler, I cut in. Do you understand what you've done to me? Come on, Jess, he said, his voice stretching with faux reason. This isn't personal. We're family. It's just paperwork. No, I said, suddenly calm. It's fraud. And the next person I'm calling isn't you. It's a lawyer. I hung up, and for the first time, I felt something sharp rise in my chest. Not just fear, not just sorrow, anger. Controlled. Focused, like a teacher, standing in front of a classroom full of liars, ready to hand out consequences. The binder was blue. I don't know why that detail stuck with me, but it did. After my call with Tyler ended, cut clean like a cord I couldn't afford to leave frayed, I drove straight to my school. It was Saturday, and the building was locked, but I had a key. Every teacher does. We're the ones who show up when no one's looking. I needed somewhere quiet, neutral. Somewhere that didn't smell like my family. I let myself into my classroom, a modest third-grade room with paper snowflakes still taped to the windows from last week's craft session. I sat at my desk, the only place that had always felt like mine, and opened my laptop. Mitchell had emailed me a Dropbox link labeled Bridge Loan 2023_full docs. It took a moment to load, and when it did, I wished it hadn't. There were 27 files. Some scanned, some digitally signed. I clicked through each one, hand trembling slightly on the mouse. My name was everywhere, not just in the signature blocks, but in the primary contact field, in the financial guarantees section, even on a form titled Affidavit of Acknowledgement. I hadn't signed a single one, at least, not willingly. That's when I saw it. Page 5 of one scanned document. A blurry but familiar scribble. My signature. Or what looked like it. But I hadn't signed that page. I hadn't even seen that contract. They had copied my name. My stomach turned. You know that feeling when you discover someone's been in your bedroom without permission? That cold, slow panic that creeps up the back of your neck? That's how it felt, only worse. Because this wasn't my sock drawer. This was my future, my credit, my safety, my daughter's safety. Avery's name floated to the surface of my thoughts, breaking through the noise like a lighthouse in a storm. That little girl in her pink pajamas, spinning around our kitchen island last week while I tried to grade papers. She depended on me, and I had no idea how close I'd come to losing control of everything we had. I started printing. Every file, every forged line, every authorized transaction. I compiled it all into a binder I grabbed from my supply cabinet, left over from a science fair unit. As I hole punched and filed each sheet, I remembered something my old mentor, Mrs. Temple, once told me when I was fresh out of grad school and overwhelmed by a class of 29 kids and one broken copier. When people underestimate you, don't correct them. Just remember where you keep your receipts. Well, I had my receipts now. The final document was a memo from Trenton Federal, addressed to my Uncle Warren. It referred to Ms. Lowell's compliance and her express support for the liquidity terms. Support? I hadn't even known this loan existed. That's when the true scope hit me. They weren't just using my name. They were relying on my silence. They thought I wouldn't ask questions. They thought I'd be too loyal, too naive, or too timid to confront them. They thought they knew me. I zipped the binder shut, tucked it into my tote bag, and locked my classroom door behind me. Back in the car, I just sat there for a moment with my head resting on the steering wheel. Outside, it had started to snow lightly, New Hampshire's quiet way of blanketing bad days in soft white lies. But this wasn't a day I could cover. I had to think. I wasn't ready to go home yet, so I did something that surprised even me. I drove to the one person who never asked me for anything, but always made me feel like I had everything I needed. Mrs. Florence Davenport, retired bank officer, my old financial literacy teacher from high school, the one who used to tell me, smart women keep the originals and copies. Her number was still in my phone. I hadn't used it in years. I parked in front of her brick bungalow, still decorated with last fall's wreath, and dialed. She answered on the third ring. Jessica Lowell, she said, before I could even speak. You have a storm in your voice, come in. It was like she knew. I stepped into her house, hugged her harder than I meant to, and pulled the binder from my tote. She didn't say a word, just gestured to the kitchen table. We sat. She opened it. And then she read every page, every forged signature, every line. 30 minutes later, she looked up, and I'll never forget the look on her face. You know, she said slowly, they've got a real problem now. Because of the fraud? No, she said, sliding her glasses down. Because they forgot who they were messing with. I wish I could say I was surprised. But when my mother weaponized a Facebook post to accuse me of abandoning blood and financially blackmailing our family, I didn't feel shock. I felt cold, empty, like the last of the illusions had finally slipped away. I hadn't even seen the post myself. It was Sunday morning. Avery was humming in the next room, building a cardboard fort with her dolls. I was making pancakes, my distraction ritual, when Maya called. Her voice was clipped. Jess, don't panic, but you need to see what your mom just posted. I pulled the phone away from my ear, logged into Facebook with a sinking feeling, and typed my mother's name. And there it was, pinned at the top of her profile, a long, emotional letter, written like a eulogy for a daughter who had, in her words, turned her back on family in our greatest hour of need. The opening line was theatrical enough to make me pause mid-scroll. This post isn't meant to shame, but to shed light on the heartbreak that happens when family forgets the meaning of unity. I kept reading. She claimed I had pulled out of a family investment, out of pride and selfishness, risking everyone's future to make a point. She implied I had been helped and supported for years, that I owed my stability to them, and that withdrawing from a shared responsibility was a betrayal of the deepest kind. There was no mention of fraud, no mention of forged documents, no mention of the fact that I never agreed to any of it. Instead, she painted me as ungrateful. Ungrateful and cold-hearted. The post ended with an earnest call for prayer. Please pray for our family, for healing, and for Jessica that she may find her way back to us. And then came the comments. Dozens already. Some from people I knew only in passing. Fellow PTA moms, old church friends, neighbors. Many sympathizing. Some offering generic support. A few saying they couldn't believe Jess would do something like that. Each word landed like a stone. They weren't just reading it, they were believing it. Maya texted again. Are you okay? I stared at the screen and typed back. No, because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was character assassination by someone who once packed my lunch every morning and kissed my forehead before school. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands numb around my coffee mug, and reread it, line by line, analyzing not just what she said, but what she carefully didn't. There were no names, no specifics, just enough innuendo to let the town draw its own conclusions. Smart, strategic. She knew how small this town was. She knew exactly how much damage a passive-aggressive post like this could do. I closed my laptop. Avery peeked out from the blanket fort, her smile bright and unaware. Can we go to the park after pancakes? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Of course, baby. Later that day, after I dropped her off at a friend's birthday party, I sat alone in my car outside the bakery, the Facebook post still circling in my mind like a vulture. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. Jessica. Her voice was clipped, calculated. I saw your post, I said quietly. I assumed you would. People deserve to know the impact of your choices. My choices? I repeated, barely keeping the edge out of my voice. Or your deception? A pause. You're twisting things, she said. You've always been dramatic, Jess. This isn't about lies. It's about responsibility. You were part of something bigger than yourself. And when things got tough, you ran. I didn't run. I was never asked. You signed my name, Mom. You let them use me. Another pause. I did what I thought was best for the family. There it was. Not what was legal. Not what was honest. Just best for the family. I'm not your scapegoat, I said softly. And I won't be your public villain. She didn't respond. So I ended the call the only way I could. I hope you enjoy the attention, but the truth is coming, and it won't need a post. Then I hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, just breathing. Because sometimes grief doesn't come from death. It comes from realizing someone is never going to be who you thought they were. And that's a funeral you have to host alone. It had been 3 days since my mother's post detonated across the neighborhood grapevine, and the silence from most of my family was louder than any accusation. I kept my head down at work, focused on my students. Teaching 3rd grade doesn't allow much room for emotional breakdowns. You're too busy tying shoelaces and pretending glitter projects aren't secretly driving you insane. Still, I could feel the stares. At the grocery store, at school drop-off, even in the parent pickup line, where Mrs. Foley, who once begged me to tutor her son for free, now wouldn't meet my eyes. It was one of those weeks where your dignity feels like a balloon with a slow leak, deflating, inch by inch. Then, late Thursday afternoon, I got a call, a number I didn't recognize. New Hampshire area code. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Jessica Lowell, came the voice. Calm, measured, warm. Yes, this is Florence Davenport. I don't know if you remember me. I do, I said instantly. Of course I remembered her. Mrs. Davenport had been my high school financial literacy teacher, and later a senior loan officer at Trenton Federal. She once stayed after school to help me understand amortization schedules, just because I looked confused. I saw a post online, she continued, her tone careful, and I couldn't help but connect the dots. I looked up the loan filings. Jessica, you should not have been listed. I blinked. She said it so plainly, so gently. Excuse me? There's no way your liability is enforceable, she said. I reviewed the documents that were filed publicly. The structure of the guarantee is inconsistent with federal lending practices. Whoever added your name did so improperly, and in my professional opinion, unethically. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I know I'm retired, she added, but I still maintain professional standing. If you'd like, I can prepare an affidavit confirming that none of the paperwork legally required for your consent was filed. I'll testify if needed. It was like someone cracked a window open in a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me. You do that? You're a good woman, Jessica. I remember you tutoring other students after school. I remember how you paid for every field trip with babysitting money. You've been taken advantage of, and it makes me sick. Tears welled before I could stop them. Not loud sobs, just the kind that arrive quietly, like old friends showing up on your doorstep. Thank you, I whispered. I'm going to send you an email, she said. I've already drafted a formal statement. You can take it to the underwriter. It's got teeth. I hung up and stared at my phone, the screen still lit with her name. And for the first time in what felt like weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I called Maya. She answered on the first ring. You okay? I think I just got a lifeline. That night, after Avery went to bed, I printed out Mrs. Davenport's statement and sat at my dining table, reading every word. It was direct, clear, and backed with decades of professional credibility. She wrote, Ms. Lowell's liability in the bridge loan dated March 12, 2023, is unfounded. No personal disclosure documentation, signature authorization, or financial counseling session, as required under Regulation Z, was provided or recorded. In my expert opinion, Ms. Lowell was not a willing or legal guarantor of the loan. Those words, not a legal guarantor, were like a balm. I highlighted them. I stared at them. And I realized maybe I wasn't powerless after all. Maybe I'd just been made to feel that way. There's a difference. And once you see it, once you feel it, you can't unsee it. The next morning, I walked into Trenton Federal Bank, wearing my teacher flats and a blazer that hadn't seen daylight since my last interview. I asked to speak with a loan officer listed on the filing. She came out with a bright smile until I handed her the binder, the affidavit, and a flash drive with copies of every document showing my signature was forged or misused. Then I watched the smile fade. I expect my name to be removed, I said calmly, and if it isn't, I'll be pursuing every legal channel available, including federal oversight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Because I had something stronger than outrage now. I had proof, and the quiet confidence of someone who'd finally remembered she had a spine and was done apologizing for using it. The email subject line was as innocuous as it was unsettling. About Avery. Urgent. From Daniel Harper, my ex-husband, Avery's father. We hadn't spoken beyond the bare necessities in nearly 2 years. A cordial birthday call for Avery here. A quick handoff after a pediatrician's appointment there. That was the extent of our rhythm. Polite, structured, unbothered. We had divorced quietly. No courtroom drama, no screaming fights. Just a mutual understanding that we wanted vastly different things. He'd always wanted the chase, the next ambition. I had Avery, and she became my anchor. But now, amid the wildfire burning through my life, his name flickered into my inbox like a forgotten ember. I clicked it, heart tight. Jessica, I heard about the situation with your family. I won't pretend I know everything, but it seems serious. I saw the post your mom wrote. My aunt forwarded it to me. This isn't my business, except where Avery is concerned. If your financial position has changed, or if there's any risk to her security, I'd like to help. I've been doing well. My firm gave me a partner track bonus. I can set up a custodial account for Avery. No strings attached. Just think about it. Daniel, I read the message 3 times. It was measured, kind, suspiciously well-worded. Daniel always did know how to say the right thing when it counted, but I couldn't ignore the timing. He hadn't offered this when I was scraping by on a single teacher's salary, and Avery needed braces. He hadn't checked in during the worst weeks of pandemic schooling, when I was holding it all together with tape and caffeine. But now, when my family had turned on me, when my name was being dragged through our small-town mud, now he wanted to help? I picked up my phone and called Maya. Daniel just offered to open a savings account for Avery, I said. She let out a low whistle. Wow, that's specific. He says it's no strings attached. But with Daniel, there's always strings. They're just silk instead of rope. I laughed in spite of myself. Do you think I should take it? Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, only if you're clear on the terms. And only if it's in your name, not his. He's Avery's father, but he hasn't earned the right to dictate her future finances just because your family blew up. I knew she was right, but it still left me uneasy. That night, after Avery fell asleep beside me on the couch, her little hand still wrapped around my thumb like she used to as a baby, I replied to Daniel, "Thanks for the offer. If you want to contribute something for Avery's future, we can discuss a 529 plan under my control. She deserves security, but that comes with boundaries. Let's talk. With lawyers, for clarity." I stared at my screen a long time before pressing send, because the truth is, sometimes the worst betrayals make you question even the good intentions. You don't know how to trust what might be genuine anymore. And that's the quietest tragedy of all. It's not just that I'd lost my family, it's that I no longer believed anyone's help came without a price. It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday where nothing should happen. I was in the middle of prepping materials for a spring reading unit, cutting laminated sentence cards and drinking cold coffee. The classroom was quiet. My students were off at music class. For 10 blissful minutes I could think, until there was a soft knock at my door. I assumed it was the janitor, or maybe a parent volunteer. I was not expecting Emily. She stood there, small as ever, even at 26, with her oversized scarf and thrift store boots, clutching her bag like it might fly away. My little sister, the one who always slipped through the cracks in our family chaos. Not loud like Tyler, not bold like me, just quiet, agreeable Emily, the eternal peacemaker. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not since the fallout. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded slowly, too stunned to speak. She stepped inside and glanced around at the decorations, paper flowers, reading posters, Avery's crayon drawings pinned to the back wall. "Looks like you," she said softly. I sat at the kidney table, gesturing for her to join me. She sat across from me like a student about to confess she'd cheated on a spelling quiz. "I need to tell you something," she said. I waited. "You didn't imagine it, Jess. What they did to you. You're not crazy." The words hit like wind against a house that's already cracked. "You don't realize how much you needed them until they arrive." "I know I'm late," she continued, "but I didn't know how to say it, or if I even had the right." "Say what?" I asked, my voice shaking. She took a shaky breath and opened her bag, pulled out a folder, familiar looking, too familiar. "They used your name," she said, "on more than just the bridge loan. I found these in Uncle Warren's filing cabinet. I was helping him pack up stuff from the old house. He's behind on the property payments. The place is going under." She slid the folder to me. Inside were 3 forms, one for the bridge loan, one for a line of credit tied to a short-term development project, one labeled Statement of Joint Intent, all of them with my signature, none of them signed by me. "They told me it was just a formality," Emily said, wringing her hands. "Mom said you'd already agreed, and they just needed help printing the right documents." I didn't think. I should have asked. Her eyes filled, but she blinked back the tears. "I was part of it, Jess. Not the forgery, but the setup. They tricked me too. And I didn't ask questions, because I didn't want to rock the boat." I sat very still. The betrayal had been choking me for weeks, but somehow it was this moment, Emily's trembling voice, that made it collapse around me like ash. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I should have said something sooner. "You just did," I said, my voice hoarse. "I want to help now," she said quickly. "Whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning, I'll back you up. I can testify. I'll write a statement. Whatever it takes." I looked at her, really looked. Her hair was pulled back. Her coat was secondhand. There was a rip in her tote bag. She wasn't part of their financial schemes. She was collateral, like me. "I believe you," I said. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for a month. I slid the folder into my bag, next to Mrs. Davenport's affidavit. Another piece, another weight shifted into place. As the bell rang and the music teacher returned my students, Emily stood up. "I'm sorry it took me this long to be brave," she said. I shook my head. "You were brave today. That's what counts." And as she slipped out the door, disappearing into the school hallway like any other visitor, I realized something I hadn't dared believe since this all began. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. You'd be amazed what people will put in writing when they believe they're untouchable. Emails, memos, text threads. By Thursday, my dining table was no longer a place for meals. It had become an evidence wall. Each document had its own labeled tab, each signature its own scanned copy. It looked like the world's least colorful scrapbook, one built not from memories, but misdeeds. Emily sat across from me, sorting through an envelope of her own. "This one," she said, handing over a folded letter, "is from Mom to Uncle Warren. She literally says, Jessica's name will help push it through. She won't mind." I stared at the line, my jaw tightening. She won't mind. That one sentence said more about how they saw me than anything else ever had. Reliable, compliant, convenient. Not anymore. We worked late into the evening, drinking lukewarm coffee and listening to Avery play with her dolls in the other room. It wasn't glamorous, but it was productive. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't playing defense. I was building something, an offense. We included the original loan documents bearing falsified signatures, Mrs. Davenport's notarized affidavit, Emily's personal statement of confession and timeline, transaction records from the joint account I had already closed, printouts of emails and text messages alluding to pre-approval I never gave, and screenshots of my mother's social media post, now quietly deleted but saved forever. The binder was 2 inches thick by the time we finished. I labeled it Unauthorized Financial Activity, Jessica Lowell. I added a copy of the underwriter policy from Trenton Federal, Emily said, tapping the spine. It explicitly states that verbal agreements from non-signers are not admissible. I looked at her with gratitude I couldn't quite say out loud. "You don't have to keep doing this." "Yes, I do," she said firmly, "because pretending to be neutral is what let them do this in the first place. And I'm done pretending." The next day, I took the binder to the bank. I wore the same blazer I'd worn before, but this time it felt like armor. The underwriter, a man in his 40s with too much hair gel and a gold wedding band, took one look at the table of contents and knew this wasn't a casual visit. "This is substantial," he said. "It's only a fraction of what I've documented," I replied, "but it's enough. I'm withdrawing any implied or inferred consent attached to this loan. I am not, and never was, a legal guarantor." He cleared his throat. "I'll need to escalate this to the compliance team." "Please do," I said. "I'll wait for their written confirmation." By Monday, the confirmation came. Via certified letter, Jessica Lowell was no longer liable for any portion of the $1.7 million bridge loan. The relief didn't come with a cheer. It came with silence. A quiet inhale. A weight lifted so gently it took hours to realize it was finally gone. That night, I tucked Avery into bed and watched her drift to sleep. I sat beside her in the dark, thinking about the way things had unraveled, then come together again, thread by thread. I didn't feel victorious, not yet, but I felt prepared, because this time, the damage they'd done didn't just hurt, it documented itself, and I was done carrying their secrets like shame. Let them carry their own now. It happened in the bank lobby. I was there finalizing some closure forms, Emily at my side, binder still in hand, when I heard my name. "Jessica." I turned. My father stood near the front desk, shoulders sagging in a suit that suddenly looked too large on him. His face, usually unreadable, was red, eyes glassy. His hands trembled. He didn't wait for permission. He crossed the floor and stood before the teller line, his voice shaking but loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "I want to apologize," he said, "to my daughter." People turned. I froze. "She should never have been part of this," he continued. "We used her. I used her. And I'm sorry." He looked at me then, really looked, but I said nothing. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There was nothing left to say. He had chosen silence when it mattered. His apology now, under fluorescent lights and public eyes, couldn't erase the damage done in private. I turned back to the clerk and kept signing. By summer, the lake house was gone, sold in silence. No reunion, no fireworks. Just a for sale sign quietly removed and a foreclosure record buried in the local paper. My family scattered after that. Tyler moved out of state. My mother, still online but quieter now. Uncle Warren, radio silent. And my father? He sends birthday cards now. Signed, not written. But me? I spent the holidays differently this year. Avery and I baked cookies for the shelter downtown, then joined Maya and her niece for a Christmas Eve bonfire in their backyard. No legacy property, no lake view, just laughter, cocoa, and the warmth of people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they were expected to. And as the firelight flickered across Avery's smiling face, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop proving your worth to people who were never listening. I don't need their apology. I have my binder. I have my name back. I have my daughter. And I have myself. That's more than they ever gave me. And everything I need.